Hobby Quick Hits. Delivering that breaking hobby news directly to your earlobes. You want to know those hot drops from the card shop? We've got you covered. With your host, John Newman.
Welcome to another edition of Hobby Quick Hits. Today we're going to do another hobby history episode. We did one of these a few months back pertaining to J. Warren Bowman, and today we're going to do another one. And I picked a gentleman who, you know, his name has kind of come out front of the hobby again, even though he's no longer with us. We all know about the 9.5 SGC mantle that just went for $12.6 million via Heritage Auctions. Well, that came from this gentleman's purchase and find. And, you know, if you're younger in the hobby, you may or may not have heard of Alan Rosen, more known as Mr.Mint. And he was really the first guy in the hobby, very outspoken, very braggadocious, sort of, had a used cars salesman sort of vibe. But no one can deny his importance, and no one can deny his smart and intelligent. He saw some stuff sort of ahead of its time. And when you ask someone who knew him, you know, whether they, you know, liked him or not, it's one of two answers. You either got, you know, I liked him a lot or loved him, or I couldn't stand the guy. There's no in-betweens. For as long as I've been in the hobby, I only really had one interaction with him. I'd say it was around 1985. It was at a card show in the New York City area. I actually don't remember the venue, but I remember going to the show, and I was actually working at Rudy's booth, the card shop I worked for, but I got a chance to walk around, and he was, you know, he's always was set up at the front of shows, and I went to his table. I had heard about him. I went to his table, and he had an unopened pack. I forgot what year it was. It was old, and I asked him how much it was. And truth be told, I was asking more out of curiosity than, you know, being able to afford it. And rather than just saying the price, which, again, would have been not in my budget, he kind of responded to me like, you don't have enough money, kid. And that was, you know, while he was telling the truth, it's still, you know, not a great response. Kind of gave me the brush off. And if you know sort of my MO, right, I'm a kids in the hobby guy. I think it's important, and you know, if the situation was reversed, that would never, you know, come out of my mouth. But you know, Alan didn't really care. Alan was sort of about Alan, so that's the answer I got. That was my one brush with him. I've seen him at shows where I was at the same show, but that was my only interaction with Mr. Rosen. So definitely a unique personality. Some people thought he was bad for the hobby. Some thought some people will tell you where we are now. He's partly responsible for that. So we're going to learn a little bit more about him. We're going to hear from our great sponsor, do our hobby news, new releases, and then we're going to get into Alan Rosen, Mr. Mint. We're going to learn some stuff even before he became who he was in the hobby. So don't go away. We'll get the show started right after we hear from Mojo Breaks.
MojoBreakShop.com is the best place to get your sealed wax products and brakes. They not only have the best selection, but the best prices. Whether it's a box or a whole case, they are your guys. They ship worldwide to your doorstep. Their reputation as one of the most trusted in the hobby goes unmatched. They are the 2021 Topps Rip Party Champion Breakers. From sports card to Pokemon cards, their selection can't be beat. They offer daily deals and pre-orders.
Hey guys, John Newman here. Mojo's prices are already great, but to save an additional 10% off anything in their store, use the code QUICKHITS. That's QUICKHITS. Check out the full service store that's open 7 days a week in Santa Clara, California, or the website at mojobreak.com.
Let's check out this week's Hobby Wax releases. Take it away, Max.
Hey guys, it's Max from the Sports Card Shop in New Buffalo once again with the weekly releases for the Sports Card Nation podcast. This week, to start us off, on the 14th, we had 2021-22 Topps UEFA Champions League Merlin Chrome Soccer. Then we have, also on the 14th, 2021 Upper Deck Skybox Metal Universe Champions. And on the 16th, we have 2022 Panini Immaculate Basketball. And that is the weekly releases for this week. Appreciate you guys tuning in to the podcast. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Let's go round the hobbyverse and catch up on this week's hobby news.
A few bigger stories this week. Let's start with PSA. They've announced another price drop down to $22 for economy service. You do have to be a member of their collectors club to get that price, but that's the lowest PSA price we've seen in a while. And as I always say, when PSA drops their prices, let's see, what the other competing grading companies do or not do in response. The Topps 2023 design has been released. White borders, very clean. This is just my assessment. Going back to the inlet picture that we've seen, like in 83 Topps, 63 Topps, 2003. It's someone mentioned, seems like every 20 years by clockwork. I don't know. I'm assuming that's done on purpose by Topps. I like those little picture insets. The one, complaint from a few people is that picture blocks sort of the team name, but the logo is very prominent. So sort of a trade-off there. I like it, especially when compared to recent designs where a little busy, kind of computer like graphics and pixels, and this is just very clean and sort of a modern spin on a traditional look is how I would describe it. And I like it. I'm looking forward to it. I don't open a ton of new stuff as I once did, but the design itself probably will have me open in a few more packs than I traditionally would as well. Derek Jeter is not the Miami Marlins GM anymore, but he's got a new gig, sort of. I think we all know Derek doesn't have to work anymore at this point. He's got that exclusive autograph deal with Topps, but now he is an investor in the Arena Club. The Arena Club is going to grade. It's another grading company. We need more grading companies. Very short on grading companies, but they're throwing their hat in the ring. Grading and authentication. This company, Arena Club, was started by Brian Lee. You may not know that name, but that gentleman is the creator of LegalZoom.com. May remember those commercials. The managing partner is BAM Ventures, which is a venture capital firm. The grading prices are as follows: $25 if you're going to keep the cards on their site, or $35 if you want the cards back in your possession, which they're saying should happen within a 30-day period. They will have a vault. No mention on where the vault is. My educated guess is Delaware, like many, but that's unconfirmed. But they will have a vault. It's free to put your Arena Club graded cards on the vault. If you sell one of your cards from their vault, they're going to take a 5% commission. Couple interesting notes here on Arena Club. Former Topps CEO Ryan O'Hara is their board advisor, and Ultra Pro will be making their slabs and providing them with Ultra Pro sleeves for the inner sleeve that the card is in the slab. So there you go, a new grading company, which, like I said, we need about 1 million more of those. Our final story for the week is PWCC has a $175 million backing from Whitehawk Capital Partners. This will allow, the intent of this backing is to allow PWCC to lend money for people's cards in their vault. So let's say you have, a $100,000 card in their vault, for example, you'll be able to get cash borrow cash, I should say, as that being the lien. So if you wanted some cash in advance, so to speak, with the intent to pay it back, this backing allows PWCC to become a lender in the card space, and we've seen that happen with a few different companies now, PWCC now being the latest.
And now, our feature presentation.
My name is Mr.Mint, Alan Rosen, generally known as the largest buyer and seller of vintage sports memorabilia in the world.
All right, you heard the man introduce himself, and he was not shy to tell you what he was about. There he talks about him and his hobby and card life. But let's talk about before that, right? Everyone is usually something before there's something else. And Mr. Mint, Alan Rosen, is no exception. He was born in New Jersey, Paterson. Before he got into sports card, he was an insurance salesman, got into selling jewelry and clothes. And what the last thing he did before he went into sports cards full time was he owned a copy machine and antique business, and then he went into cards full time. He was married to his wife, Marnie, 2 children, Jenny and Blake was actually one of his right-hand men when he was making a lot of his purchases. Alan was the first self-promoter really in the hobby. I mean, this guy would take full-page ads out in many of the trade publications, and he was willing to travel. Very few dealers around this time would travel significant miles to make purchases. Today that seems kind of odd, like a lot of people traveling the show circuit and buying. But back in this time, in the early 80s, late 80s, early 90s, travel, while possible, obviously, for dealers, it was sort of unheard of. Actually, many dealers were not full-time, right? Most dealers had a regular job, and dealing cards at shows was a side hustle. Well, for Mr. Mint, it was his job. So he was willing to advertise more, travel more. I don't want to say spend necessarily more. Well, I'll say this. He had more cash than most dealers, which allowed him to buy more collections. And that really started to put him on the map. Like I said, he would travel, he would buy collections, and a lot of famous collections that became famous for what we know of them now.
Whenever I leave the house, basically, I bring between $20,000 and $50,000.
What he didn't mention there, that was Alan himself again, was besides the cash on hand, he also carried a weapon. He was known for carrying cash, so he was a target. He also usually traveled with an entourage of 4 to 5 folks. A lot of times, like I mentioned, his son Blake and his team. So there was a group of them, but pack some heat to protect his money. Another thing about Allen that I don't think gets talked enough about or gets overlooked. We know like the big auction houses the way we know them today, right? The Heritages, the Goldens, etc. Well, Allen started really one of the first auction houses pertaining exclusively to sports cards, and he ran it out of his New Jersey home via telephone. So people would call and place bids. He'd set, a time limit on the auction, and people would call and phone in bids. Now, you got to remember, this is before the computer age and the social media age as we know it today. Today, you can go online and place all your bids, but this predates that. And so he really was, sort of a pioneer in auctions, starting it via the phone out of his house. At one point, he owned 9 separate T206 Honus Wagners. He wrote 2 books. I don't own the books anymore, but I read both of them. And, I don't have them anymore. I'd love to refer back to some of the things. But, one book talks about how to buy and make money. And a lot of the stuff in there really rings accurate today. Again, like him or not like him, he, had his finger on the pulse, knew what he was doing, had the wherewithal and the capital to make it happen. But many of those mantras that he put in his books still really ring true today. And you hear other people talk about it, and he was one of the first to really kind of put it out there. A couple quotes from Allen that I think sort of epitomizes who he was and his style. He said, quote, "Never fall in love with anything you've bought. Be prepared to disown it for the right price at any time." It's funny hearing that quote really hits home to me. I've talked about this on an episode of Hobby Quick Hits way back when about my store days from 92 to 97 and how I got attached to certain cards and wouldn't sell them while I was, doing a store, and how I, made a mistake by getting attached to cards. And, if I ever did a store again, it's something I would learn from that past mistake, that if you're running a business, you can't get attached to the cards. If you're not, like I'm not really now, I mean, I sell cards, but you're more, able to have a PC, so to speak, because your mortgage doesn't rely on you having to sell cards. So interesting quote there from Allen, and I think it really rings true depending on the situation you're in. Obviously, you got to remember, for him, this was his full-time 100% business, so he did not get attached to the cards. While he wanted things and memorabilia, the end goal was to sell them and make a profit. Another quote, he said, "I collect money, $100 bills. I'm loud, I'm braggart, and I'm brash, but I'm the best."
All you do is give me aggravation. I don't want to deal with you anymore. I think all 3 of the cards are fake.
Most will tell you he did not have a great bedside manner, as maybe, that clip illustrates, and that's why many didn't like him. Mr. Mint was an opportunist, to say the least, in the early to mid-'90s when the vintage Star Wars market exploded. Much like he did with baseball cards and sports cards, he took out big full-page ads saying that he was buying vintage Star Wars collections, and even referred to himself as Mr. C10. I will say that his Star Wars buying was not as fruitful as his, baseball collection and sports card collection buying. But again, it just shows you how he, sees the market and tries to take advantage of where it is and where it's going. Now, I've heard some, people talk about he ripped people off took advantage of people. Here's my take on that. Now, while he may have been carrying a gun, he didn't point it at anyone and tell them that they have to take the offer or else. He would negotiate these deals with folks many times in their own home, at shows, and it was them that had to say, okay, I'll take it. And it's negotiations. I think sometimes we're guilty of this, right? We look at deals he made in the 80s and 90s and what he paid for things, and we relate them to what they bring now. And we say, man, he bought that for, that mantle for $10,000, and it's, that's a $7 million card now. Well, it wasn't $7 million then. And so we can't do that. That you can't criticize him for that. So, he made offers. People accepted them. Was he shrewd? Could he be overbearing and domineering? Sure. But a lot of people can be that. Ultimately, people didn't always sell their stuff to him. He in his book, he said that, he didn't get the deal every time he went to someone's house or every time he was negotiating at a card table. So, people didn't always sell to him. So, the people liked the price they paid for it. So, when I hear ripping someone off is maybe when someone who doesn't know, a younger kid or something that doesn't know what they have. And I don't think, that was Mr. Mint's MO. While the bedside manner left a lot to be desired. I think he said what he could pay, and it was up to that seller to pull the trigger or not pull the trigger. And like it or not, Allen was really one of the faces, I don't want to say the face, but one of the faces in the hobby during this time period. He was appearing on Good Morning America, Sports Illustrated, and Sport Magazine, did major feature articles about him. He was even featured in an Archie comic as himself. There is a Mr. Mint Beanie Baby. Yep, you heard me correct. A Mr. Mint Beanie Baby. The 2008 movie, Diminished Capacity, starring Bobby Cannavale, also had a character in that movie that was 100% based on Mr. Mint, Allen Rosen. It was played by Bobby Cannavale, and that character's name in the film, the Mint Man. So 2 mints, the Mint Man. And Allen Rosen was very critical and was not enthralled and enthused by the way he was portrayed in that movie. He was the sponsor and driving force behind the New York Yankees 1961 30th reunion show in Atlantic City. He was even a sponsor of some of the gift bags given out at some of the Nationals.
I'm the longest running dealer in the hobby, and I don't sell anything at the show, so I'm there to buy, and I like to be noticed. As a matter of fact, I become so obnoxious that I don't do a show unless I have the front table. Not everyone likes my act.
Because this is not a very impressive looking ring.
What the hell with those people?
As you heard from himself, when he set up at shows, he had a demand. He wanted to be that front first table when you walk in the show that everyone sees. I know he's declined setting up at a show where the promoter did not allow that to happen. Most promoters acquiesced. He paid probably a little extra sometimes for those spots. He only did shows that he perceived were good. So if Mr. Mint asked to set up at your show, it was perceived as a compliment that your show was Mr. Mint worthy. And like I said, he was always demanded that right up front table to be the first thing you'd see as you walked in. He was known for standing out in front of it and, being a promoter in himself and talking to people and garnering attention. I do know in talking to some dealers who set up at shows with him, and like I said, I was working at the time for someone who was setting up at the shows. Some of the dealers were not fond of that preferential treatment and just his style and sort of carnival barker, if you will. But as you just heard from that quote from Alan Rosen himself, he really didn't care what other people thought. And again, I think that's, something to be said, right? He did he was himself, like him or not, and that was his whole MO. Believe it or not, for as big as he was in the hobby and with all the purchases he made, I don't know how many of you know this, but he was not a fan of grading or graded cards. He chose to buy cards raw based on condition. I mean, obviously, he tried to buy the best condition cards, but he did not necessarily believe in grading. He obviously loved to traveled the country in search of deals, setting up at shows in search of more deals, and he traveled so much he got to know, in certain towns, he loved fine dining, and he got to know, the restaurant owners and had favorite places he would like to eat dinner, maybe entertain a potential client, got to know the owner of the restaurant, got whatever seat in the house he wanted, and, made the restaurant tour as well. I think about that, even us, right, when we go to nationals and we find a restaurant we're fond of and we like, right, we tend to go back there again, the next time that national is in that city. And so, I mean, that's just, I think, human nature there. Unfortunately, Alan was struck by leukemia, but in the early stages, he was still doing the show circuit, traveling, and working, so to speak, even after his diagnosis, but eventually succumbed to his illness in 2017 at the age of 70 years old. That's going to be the hobby history of Mr. Mint, Alan Rosen. Definitely a polarizing figure of the hobby. But again, whether you love him, hate him, that rare in-between person, you can't argue with sort of what he brought to the table, right? We have outspoken folks in the hobby today. I don't have to mention names, but, many can point to 3 or 5 people in the hobby with big voices, big platforms, braggadocious in some cases, right? Well, Alan created that in the hobby. He was the, trendsetter there, even back before social media. Imagine him in his prime with the social media we have now, Instagrams, TikTok, Twitter. You'd think he was a big personality then. He'd probably be an even bigger personality had he been in the heyday of today's social media age. So I hope you learned some stuff. I know I did in the process of researching for this episode. Many of the stuff I did know already, being my age and, being a Northeast kid myself, New York City, and, seeing them sort of in action at the Northeast shows. Like I said, I only really had one interaction with them, as I said in the intro. Not a good one, to say the least, but it is what it is. So there you go. I hope you learned something. I know I did. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let me know what you think. Again, we're going to do these hobby histories every probably couple months. I don't want to overdo them, but every couple months we'll select another person from the hobby that's no longer with us and kind of talk about what they did for the hobby and what their accolades and accomplishments were. If you have someone in mind that you'd like to see me cover, by all means, let me know. And let me know what you think of these type of episodes. All right, that's going to do it for this Hobby Quick Hits episode, Hobby History. Mr. Mint, Alan Rosen. Hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned some things, even if you knew quite a bit. I hope there was a few tidbits in there to add on to your knowledge of Alan Rosen. And if you don't know Alan Rosen, I hope maybe this episode went a ways to, help you learn a little bit more about, I'll say legend of the hobby. I mean, even if you don't like him, even people who don't like him should be able to, talk about his contributions or what he brought to the table, pun unintended. But again, love him, hate him, a big figure in the hobby, one we have to acknowledge and talk about. And that's hopefully this episode enlightened you a little bit on what he was about. So we're going to bid you adieu, wish you well, stay safe, and we'll see you very soon.